Hi everyone, here's the book chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Autumn by Ellie Smith, a book I've had since it came out in 2016, but which I've waited to read so long, partly because I don't know if you can see, but the text is unjustified. The novel's text is not justified, and that rubs me the wrong way, I'm sorry to say that, but also because when it came out, I don't know how accurate this is, but when it came out, the book was advertised as the very first Brexit novel, the very first novel dealing with the results of the EU referendum in the UK, and I waited to read this book for the same reason somebody stuck on a raft in the middle of the ocean maybe is not going to watch Jaws on their portable DVD player in order to pass the time. I know about Ellie Smith's reputation as an incredible novelist, but this is the only book of hers I've read, so I'm not sure whether it's a good representative of her brother Hoover, but Autumn is definitely a virtuosistic performance. From chapter to chapter, the book changes from being a lyrical, even dream-like experience, to laugh-out-loud hilarious, to being kind of a book of satire about the situation in the UK in 2016 and in many ways still today. Many characters in this book are very passionate about what they call arty art, especially pop art from the 1960s, and there is a very perceivable tension in the book between being about intellectual ideas, about being about the function of art in the world, the nature of human experience. How can we possibly access truth? What makes us good people, decent human beings? And I wish to discuss these topics, by the way, through elaborate language, through puns too, by playing with registers and with lyricism. In fact, even though setting aside my idiotic complaint about the book not being justified, it makes sense that it isn't, because at times some chapters in here do read a lot like poetry. And at the same time, there's also a clear wish in here to discuss very mundane things, to discuss the life of characters in such an uncertain historical moment. And this tension is never conflictual. The book flows maybe from a chapter where one character who is asleep dreams that he has become a tree, into another chapter where a young woman goes to the post office and has to deal with a problematic clerk, and there is no tension there. It just flows beautifully from one scene into the next. The playfulness of the book in terms of register, in terms of lyrical versus mundane, in terms of what it does with its formatting, extends to the book as a physical object too. The end papers do something nice and offer a glimpse into that pop art which is such a central concern of the book, especially in its second half. And the book itself, it has this very nice brown color, but then if you look at the sleeve, something interesting goes on here too. It plays with its form in a very subtle way, very differently from books on crack like Mark Danielewski's The Familiar, with all the different fonts and all the chapters written in different style. Some of them don't necessarily make too much sense, and you get all these nice 3D pictures, and the book weighs like a coffin. Very different approaches here. The book jumps a lot chronologically between, across the 20th century really, but most notably between the early 90s and the present time, that is, in the novel 2016. So be prepared to keep track of a few characters and of what happens in different years in the course of the 90s, but that's not too complicated at all. The book is not too long. All of these events are rather easy to keep track of. In terms of the central concern of the book, this relationship between this girl that then grows up to be a young woman and then a woman, and this old man who, it's definitely the strongest element of the book. It's what I'm probably going to remember the most, the way this relationship is played out. This old man's teachings, his peculiar but very intelligent look at the world, and the way he teaches this young woman basically to give people the benefit of the doubt, which sounds like a very basic and simple message to be what is kind of the message at the heart of the whole book. but it really isn't. Just like the book is about autumn, you know, that almost sounds cheap. You know, we all know what autumn is associated with. Harvest, fruit ripening, but the winter looming on the horizon, the days get shorter, the fun is almost over, and as such this almost sounds like a metaphor that is, well, way too easy to talk about a place such as England, the UK actually, after the EU referendum, the uncertainty on the horizon, we had some fun, but now things are going to get tougher. But instead the metaphor is much more elaborate than that. Just as that central concern, the idea of giving people the benefit of the doubt, it is honestly a much tougher lesson to apply to your own life than it sounds, and the book gives some very beautiful instances of that by showing you certain characters and forcing you to reassess your opinion of them. In a way, it shows how in today's landscape where, social landscape where people very often tend to be polarized, it shows that instead there is lots of common ground between people where we can get in touch with one another. And it's important to remember that, because if you forget that, if you assume that people are, either enlightened or evil, bad shit inevitably happens. I had a great time with Autumn. I think it's just incredibly brilliant writing. I can imagine a possible complaint with the book, and I'm saying the word complaint, but I'm putting two very big asterisks close to it, which is that, superficially speaking, it might seem like the novel's political setting and background does not interact too much with the life of these characters, of the central characters in the novel, besides showing that maybe the way women have been treated during the EU referendum's campaign and in the months after, has some very interesting parallels, some hideous parallels with other moments in recent British history. But that's kind of it. But at the same time, the first asterisk, the first thing is, well, there's really no obligation that the novel should be about Brexit, or that Brexit should play a major role in the book. Sure, the book itself dedicates some chapters to describing in lyrical and hilarious and, well, depressing terms the situation in the UK after the referendum, but that's it, and it's fine if that is it. I also think that if I personally or other people expected the novel to be specifically and 100% about the Brexit referendum, that might have had something to do with the fact that, again, I think the novel was kind of advertised at the time as being a novel about Brexit. I attended a talk with Ellie Smith when the novel came out, where she was asked questions about that, but again, no obligation in the novel. And secondly, because this specific situation, the outcome of the EU referendum, especially in 2016, but kind of today too, it's sort of difficult to, to make it the central event in a book, because what do you possibly discuss? It's such an uncertain situation. It's still, nobody really knows where it's going, that the feeling of uncertainty is really what you can use in a story, in a novel, and Autumn uses it, and it does it perfectly, as well as it uses the polarized political climate in order to stage that reflection on the need to remember that people are people, and that they are disgusting and beautiful just as we are, because we are people too. So yeah, I don't think that's a possible point to complain about, and maybe no one complained it about ever. Another thing you might need to keep in mind is that it seems to me that this is a book quintessentially about Britain. It makes fun of certain idiosyncrasies of the British system. It deals once again with the situation in Britain in 2016. I'm very curious to hear from readers who read the book, but who come from other parts of the world. Maybe they've never been to Great Britain, maybe they don't know British society that much. What was your impression of the novel? Were you surprised by the way it handled its satire, by the way it handled the political situation of its time? Or could you relate with the characters' plight, with their feelings toward all these things happening? Let me know. I'm very curious to hear about your experience with the book. I do plan absolutely to read the other books in the series, because this is, of course, a 4-book series: Winter, Spring, are already out. I don't think summer is out yet. And I'll let you know what I think about those once I read them. And thank you as always for watching, guys. Bye, guys.